Okay, so that works good. We can get rid of this. We can do a new one. New note, test, add this note here. That looks great. All right, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are gonna go over how you can create a little Crud app using Next.js. We're gonna use Prisma, and we are gonna use, what else are we gonna use? We're gonna use Tailwind, and we are gonna use TypeScript. So kind of a neat little stack here. We're gonna do a real basic Crud app. We'll just do like a notes app, but we'll show you how to do it with Next.js and Prisma together. So let's get right into this. So I'm over here in my terminal here, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna run npx, and then we'll say create, and we'll say next app, and we'll go at, and we'll say the latest, and then what else will we do? We're gonna go --ts for TypeScript. So this should set up our app, our next app, and then this will ask you to name your project. So we'll just call it notes here, like this, and then we'll let this install. All right, so that is looking like it's installed. So let's cd into this. We called it notes here, and then let's just open it up in VS Code and see what we got. All right, so right off the bat, you can see we got a lot of stuff we're working with, a lot of folders here. So this is gonna be our pages folder in Next, and in here we have an API, and this is where we're gonna be hitting all our different routes and making our calls to our Prisma backend. So our Prisma is just gonna be an ORM and connect to a database, which is gonna be a Postgres database. And we can hit that directly from here. So we don't need any middleman. We can do all of it within the Next.js little structure here. So you can see here, we got a hello TS example here with a little TypeScript markup here. And you can see here, we call these handlers here. So we'll be using kind of a similar structure to this when we actually get going here. So before we get too deep into this, I want to actually come over to this Tailwind, because we're going to use Tailwind for a little bit of markup. So these are the docs, those will be in the description, but basically you're just going to want to come over and install these things. So I'm going to open up a terminal here, and we will do everything within here. So I'm just going to paste this in, but basically it is npm install -d for development, Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and auto prefixer. All right, so all those packages were added there. Now let's come back over here, and we're just gonna use this here. And if we come back over, paste that in, npx tailwind css init-p. All right, and that's gonna create a little post CSS config file for us. So if we come over here, you can now see we have this Tailwind config, and you could add whatever kind of theming, anything you might want in there. And that is how that's going to work. Finally, we're going to come back over, and we have a little bit of, let's just copy this whole thing. A little bit of config here, so we'll copy that whole thing over. And then we'll come in to this Tailwind config and paste that in here. I don't think anyone wants to see me typing this out, so just look at the docs. But here it is for you anyways. And then I think we have one more thing. Let's come back over here to the global CSS, and we'll copy this over right here. And then we'll come in to our global CSS, which is in our styles here, global CSS. We don't need any of this right here. We can get rid of that. And we're just gonna paste this in. And these are just gonna bring in other various components, utilities, and whatnot from Tailwind. So that should be good. Now, once that is done, we can get rid of these here, come back over, and now let's just see if this is all working. So let's run yarn dev, and if we come back over here, open up a new window, and we can say localhost 3000, and then you see we get this welcome to Next.js right here. I do realize I just run yarn dev. You can run npm run dev as well. I've just in the habit of using yarn, even though we didn't use it on this one. So if you don't have yarn installed, npm is just fine. All right, so that is looking pretty good. So we want to test out also that the Tailwind is actually working. So let's come into our index.ts here, or let's come into our pages here and our index.tsx. And we can close this up for now. And let's just test that this is actually working. So if we come in, let's say to this div here, we'll just get rid of these styles here. And we're just going to use some Tailwind. So this isn't going to be a Tailwind course, but we're just going to go like this, margin top that stands for, and we'll just say 10 like this, and just see if that shows up when we check out this here, and it does. So that is working well. All right, so that looks like Tailwind's all set up. So now we want to get Prisma going here. So let's come back into our server. We can shut this down for now. Let's bring this up a little bit and clear this out. All right, so let's run, we're gonna run npm install, and we'll say Prisma, and then we will say -- save -dev, because it's just gonna be a dev dependency here. So we'll install that. All right, and then once that's installed, we can run npx, and we'll say Prisma init like this, and that will initialize Prisma for us. So there are a few different database types we can use. We're going to be using Postgres here, but you can use MySQL, SQLite, MongoDB. So there's a bunch of possibilities. So let's check out what this init did for us here. So if we come back over here, inside of our folders here, we got a little Prisma here, and this is our schema right here. If we come down, you see we got this database URL. So what we're going to want to do is connect this to our Postgres database. So we're going to need a .env file right here. And you see it's created for us already. So we have to replace this with our database string. So we're going to come over here. And this is the Prisma docs. And they're going to tell you exactly what everything means in this string here. So if we scroll down, we're going to have to adjust this connection URL to fit our own database. So basically, here's an explanation of each component. You're going to have the user here, which is you're going to be your root user, your computer, the password, the host, the port, which is going to be localhost for us, and it's usually 5432. The database, so you're going to create a database, and you want to add the name of it to this string here. MyDB for this, and then the schema here. So let's come back and I'll show you what my database schema is going to look like here. All right, so I'm just going to paste mine in here, and then we'll just show you what it means here. So we got Postgres here. We got the user, which is me. We got the local host, and most likely you're going to be on 5432. My database, I've named database. So create a database and name it whatever you want, and then put it there. And then the schema is going to be public for me. So that is looking pretty good. So hopefully that is not too complicated. You might need to look up how to create a Postgres database, but it is not super hard. So that should be fine. All right, so now let's come back here. We should be connected to our database right now. So now we're going to come in to our schema.prisma right here. We should be connected through here, so that should all be good. And now we're going to come down below. So we create a model by going like this, model. And ours is going to be called note here, because that's what we're creating, a notes app. And then there's going to be some different values here. So we're going to have an ID, and that's going to be an int. And then it's going to be at ID and at default. And then we're going to pass in auto increment. So this default is going to automatically run when we run this if we don't pass in anything else as an ID. So it's just going to auto increment. And then next we're going to have just a title here, and that's going to be of string like this. And then we are going to have content like that, string, and then we're going to have a created at field. And that's going to be a date time, and we're going to have a default for that, and that's going to default to just when it's created. So not new, sorry, now, which will be when it's created. Then below we'll just have an updated at in case we ever wanted to update it which I don't know if we'll actually do in this. We'll see. We might, I guess the update, we might use it for the update function. We'll see. Okay, and this formats nicely for us. I think that might be an extension. Let me check the Prisma. Yeah, yeah. So there's this Prisma extension you might want to add, which does syntax highlighting and auto formatting and auto formatting everything else. So check that out if you want that feature. Okay, so this is looking good. So now we want to see if this is actually going to push up our data. So what we're going to run is npx, and we'll say Prisma db push. Now, DB isn't specific to mine, which I call DB. This is just for anything. So any database will be called with the Prisma DB push here. Just give me a little error this. I'm just going to paste this in again and see if that works. And let's try this again. And this time, it looks like it's going to work. So just make sure this database string is correct, and you should have no problems. All right, so that looks like it worked, but we want to see if it actually worked. So let's check that out. So we're going to go npx Prisma Studio. And you can see this is going to open it up for us. And you can see our note model here. So we got nothing in there, but it shows it to us. So that DB push worked like a charm. All right, so that is looking pretty good. Now, we're going to want to install some other stuff with Prisma here. So we're going to close out of that here. And we're going to go npm, what is it, install, at Prisma / client. And what this is going to do is allow us to access the database from Next.js. So it'll kind of be the bridge between the two. All right, so once that's installed, we're going to run here npx, and we'll say Prisma generate. And this has to be run every time your schema is changed, because you have to generate it for Prisma to work. All right, so that is looking good. So let's come over here and take a look at what we got here. We got our schema set up here. So the last thing that we kind of want to set up here is going to be in the root of our folder. So we're going to come over here. Just make sure you're in the root. And we're going to create a new folder here. And we're just going to call this lib. And then inside of this lib folder, we're going to have a new file. And that's going to be called prisma.ts, like that. Now here we're going to add a little bit of boilerplate here, and I'll explain it. So what this file is going to allow us to do is gain access to our database wherever we want. So basically all we'll have to do is import Prisma anywhere in our Next app. And that way we'll have access to that actual database, and we can make calls to it and whatnot. So this is the markup. We're importing Prisma client here. We're going to declare this globally, so it's so we can access it basically everywhere we need it. And then we're just exporting it right here. So copy this down. I'll also leave a link to it in the docs, so you can just copy it over as well. But I didn't want to just type that out. So there it is. All right, so that's all we need from there. Let's get rid of some of these. All right, so that was kind of a lot of setup. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. But now let's get into actually creating this kind of CRUD app here. So back into our index.js. This is kind of our main page where we're going to do all our work. We're going to want to basically get rid of everything in here. So let's just do that. We'll leave the div here, and then we'll get rid of all of this going up to here. We can get rid of this style right here too. We don't need that. All right, so the first thing we're going to need is a little bit of markup. So this is going to be a notes app. So let's come in here, and we're going to create a bit of a form here. So let's give ourselves a title to start with, h1, and we'll come in here and we'll just call it notes, like that. And we'll come back, and in here we can go like this, class name, and then we can just add a little bit of Tailwind stuff right here. All right, so we got a little bit of Tailwind going on in there. And then below this, we're going to want to create a form. So we'll say form, And inside of the form here, we're going to have an onSubmit here. And then inside the onSubmit, we're going to do some brackets here. And we'll pass in the event. And then in here, we're going to call a couple different things. Now, we're going to come back to this, but we're going to say e.preventDefault. So we don't want to call the default form action. Otherwise, we'll be refreshing the page there. So that, and we'll be good for now. And then we're going to come back and we'll add a handle submit below this. But for now, let's continue on here. And then in here, we're going to add a class name also. And we'll just go and add a bunch of Tailwind stuff too. All right, so we got a lot of markup there for our Tailwind. That'll make our form look a little bit better. All right, so let's add an input here. And this is going to be of type text. And then we're going to come down below here. And inside of here, we're going to say placeholder. And we'll just have title here. And then we'll have a value here. And that's going to be equal to form.title, which we're going to create with use state above. So that won't be there quite ready yet. And then we'll have an onChange. So for anytime we type, this onChange will be called. And we will pass in the event. And then we'll say set form, which we're going to, again, have use state with set form. And then we're going to spread in the form. And then title is going to be e.target.value. And that will set us up. Now, we don't have form set or anything, so we're going to go ahead and add those in a second. But first, let's add a little more styling just so this looks okay. All right, and then for we can copy this input down. And actually, we want this to be a text area. Like this. This type text can go. Placeholder is going to be content, like that. Value is going to be content, which we'll add again in a second. This will be content, and that is correct. And the rest, I think, should be able to stay the same. Make sure you spell text area correct there. Okay. So we got a little red squigglies here. Let's go ahead and before we finish this off, let's take care of that up above here. So in order to do that, we're going to come in here and we're going to say const and we're going to say form and set form like this. And that is going to be equal to use state. And we want to bring that in. And then we're going to go like this and say title. And that'll just be an empty string to start. And we'll have content, and that'll also be an empty string. And then finally, we're going to use an ID, and we'll set that as we'll set it as a string for now. So that is fine. Now we can go ahead and save this. Let's add some typings to this because we want this to use TypeScript here. So might as well use it. So we're going to say an interface here, and we're going to say form data like that. And then we're going to have a title, and that's going to be a string. We are going to have content, and then finally an ID, and that's going to be a string as well. Okay, so that is looking good. And then for this, in order to type this, this isn't going to be a TypeScript course, but just to show you how this would work, we're going to pass in that form data like that. And that should be good. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. Now, if we come down below here, this should, yeah, all our errors are now gone because we took care of that. So let's finish up with some of this markup because we're not quite done here. So below here, but inside of our form still, we're going to add a button. And this button is going to say add. And we'll just do a little plus sign. And this is where we're going to add a note. And then inside of this button, it's going to be of a type of submit. So when we submit our form, that's what this will use here. And then we'll come over here and we'll add a little Tailwind as well. All right, so just a few more Tailwind classes here. Again, not a Tailwind course, but this will just give us some basic styling that'll make things look not too terrible. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this form out and see exactly what it looks like right now. So let's come and we'll run the server again. Yarn dev here. And if we come over and refresh the server here, you see we got these this beautiful little notes app running right now. So we got title, we can type into it, content, and right now this will not do anything because we haven't hooked anything up. So this is what it's going to look like, and then below here we'll have a list of the various notes that we've created with the ability to delete or also update them. So that is what we're working towards. Let's keep it going here. All right, so now that we have this note form up and running, we want to have the ability to actually go ahead and create a note. So I think we should go ahead and do that first. So we're going to come into this API here. We don't need this hello.ts. We can delete that. And then we're going to come in and we'll create a new file here. And we're just going to say, call it create.ts. Okay. Now inside, make sure we save this. I don't know what we did there. Inside this create.ts is where we're going to make our API call. So we got to import a couple things here. The first one we're going to import is going to be Prisma. And that is going to be from // lib Prisma there. So we're going to need that. And then also for TypeScript, let's import a couple other things. So we'll import, and we need next API, what is it? API request, which is right there. And then also next, what is it? API response there. So that's going to be from next. That looks good. And now we're going to want to create one of those handlers we showed earlier with that example. So we're going to say export default like that. And we'll have an async function and async function like this. And we're going to call it handler like that. And we'll have a request here. So if you're used to Express, you'll kind of know this sort of syntax. And this will be, we'll pass in the type here. So this will be the next API request. And then we'll have a response. And that'll be, I don't know why this isn't showing up, next API response like this. Okay. And then inside of this, we're going to go and we're going to get the title and the content. So in order to do that, we're going to say const, and we'll destructure here and say title, and we'll say content. And then that's going to be equal to the request.body. So we're going to get the title and the content off the body here. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to do a try catch block. And inside of here, we're going to say await, and we'll call prisma.note, and we'll say .create. Create like this, and then we'll pass in the object here. And inside this object, we want to pass in the data. So we'll say data, and that'll be an object as well. And we'll have title, and we'll have content like this. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So we're destructuring, getting the title and the content, which we're passing in our form. So we're calling this. Then we're going to add a try catch block here, and we're calling prisma.note.create. So you're going to have create, you can have delete, you can have find many. There's all different types of Prisma calls you can look up in the doc. So prisma.note.create, and then pass in the data that we want to create here. Now, finally, we're going to come down below here, and what we're going to say is res.status, and we're going to pass a status of 200, which is okay, and then JSON like that. And then in here, we can pass in a message here, and we'll just say note created like that. So just to show that it was successfully created. Oh, and an error. Yeah, if we want to do an error, let's just log it out right now. You can pass back an error response too if you want or something. And we'll just say failure like that. Okay. So that is good for now. You probably want to pass back this error response, but we're not have time for all that right now. So this should work to create our note for us. So let's come back over to our index.js. We actually want to create that function that will allow us to create the note. So we can come up here and come into our home function here, and this is where we're going to add our create function. So let's have an async function here, and we're going to say create, and we're going to have some data, and we can use that same form data because that's what we're going to be passing in here as the typing, and then another try catch, and in here we're just going to go and use fetch. So we can use the basic fetch command here, and we'll just pass in http:// and we'll say localhost 3000, which is our URL, and then we'll go /API, which is the folder it's in, and then create, which is what we just created. So that's what we did here. We were in our API here and create. So that is where that URL is coming from. So now that you have that, we're going to have a object here, and we're going to pass in the body, and we'll say JSON .stringify because we want to stringify the data. And then we'll have a second thing, which is headers. We've got to pass in the headers here. And we'll say content type like that, and we'll say application /JSON. Okay. Then we'll come down below that, and the method that we want to use here is obviously going to be a post. So we're going to pass that in. So that is how that's all going to work. And then we'll have this catch here after. But first we want to do a .then here. And then we're going to do a .then like this. And we will just pass in a way to clear the form. So we're just going to say set form like this and pass in the title, empty string, and we'll say content. Empty string, and ID is going to be an empty string, although we're not setting ID right now, but that is fine. Okay, so we're going to come back and add a few things to this later on, but for now that's should be fine. And again, let's just console out the log there. So we're just going to think we have no errors at all, so that should be good. All right, so that is looking pretty great. So now we want to create this handle submit. So when we call this form and we press submit, we want to call a function here to actually handle our submit here. So we're going to say const, and we'll say handle submit like that. And that's going to be an async function. And we will say data again. That's going to be form data again. Then we're going to have an arrow function here and open up some brackets. And one more time, we'll do a little try catch action. And inside of here, we will go create. So we're just going to call this create here and pass in the data. Okay. And then come down and console.log that error like we did before. Okay. So all we're doing in this handle submit is we're calling this create here, which will be right here. All right. And then we actually want to call that. So we're just going to come in here and we'll just say handle submit. And we will pass in that form as it currently is. All right, so this form's going to have the title and the content. We're going to pass that into the handle submit here, which will call this create function and pass that data to our create function right here. Okay, so I think that is looking pretty good. Hopefully that's all we need in order to create an actual node. So let's try this out. So we'll refresh our page here and we'll just say test note like this. And then we'll say this is a test note like this. And if we add this, it'll clear that out. So that's working, but we obviously haven't, we obviously can't see anything yet. So let's come back over here and we can open up a new tab and we can run npx Prisma Studio. And now you can see this test note. I'll bump that up a bit. But we have a test node in here and everything is looking great. So we have the ability to create a note just like that with Prisma and Next.js. Now, let's go on and actually be able to show these notes is the next thing we'd actually want to be able to do. All right, so in order to fetch the data, we're going to have to use something called get server-side props. Because Next is server-side rendered, we're going to use this, and we don't have to deal with stuff like CORS issues and all that type of stuff, which is nice, but it does add a little bit of extra markup right here. So we're going to come down below here, and we're going to say export, and we'll say const and get server-side props. And then we're going to have a typing for this. So we'll say get server-side props like that. And that's going to be equal to an async function. And then in here, we can call prisma.note whatever we want. So we're going to say const notes like this. And that's going to be equal to await. And we'll say prisma.note.findMany is what we're going to be calling here. And we could just call this like this here if we wanted. And then we could come down below this here and we could say return, and we'll say props, and then just notes like this. So this is going to give us access via props to all of our various notes like that. So this has to be brought in. So let's come up to the top here and bring this stuff in first. So we're just going to say import Prisma from, and then we'll say what is it, lib/Prisma like that. Go ahead and save that. So again, we have access to this Prisma everywhere because of that markup we did in the lib right here. So this gave us access throughout our whole app. That's why we had to go ahead and do that. So that is giving us access to that. And then we also want to import the get server-side props that didn't get imported. Okay, so now we have access to that get server-side props here, and we're calling this. So this should give us access to all of our various notes. Now we are going to run into one little issue with the date. So we're going to add one more thing here. And we can go like this and say select like this. And then inside here, we can return the fields that we actually want to call. So if we don't want everything like the created at, because the created at is actually going to give us a little bit of an issue with serializing the dates, which is going to cause a little error. So for us, we're not actually going to get that right now. There's other ways you can work around that, but this is just going to be easier for this little tutorial like right here. So we're going to say that's title is going to be true, ID we're going to get, so that'll be true. And then finally, we will get content, and that'll be true as well. Sounds good. And then we just need commas. Okay, so that is looking good. All right, so everything there should be pretty good. And now we should have access to these props right now. Now we have to actually bring these into our actual component. We're exporting this, but we want to be able to bring it in. So let's come back up, and inside of here, we're going to actually pass this in here. So we'll say notes like this. And what we're going to want is to type that as well. So let's just come up and above this, come here, we'll do another interface. And we will say notes. And that's going to have an ID of string. Content of string also. That should not be a comma. And this is going to be an array of them. And we gotta obviously, there we go. All right, so now we have this interface notes, which we can call here. And we're gonna get rid of that typing there. All right, so now this is looking pretty good. So now we have access to those notes, but we're gonna wanna be able to actually show them somewhere. And then below this form here, we're gonna have another div here, and we will do a little bit of markup with this as well. So we're going to have a div. Let's just add some Tailwind stuff. All right, the Tailwind stuff I don't think is overly important, so that's why I'm not going over every single thing, but we just have a little bit of styling, make it look a little bit better. Then we're going to have a UL like this. Inside of that, we're going to have some notes.map. We're going to map over the notes right here, pass in an individual note like this. And then we will come inside of this here. And we'll just have some LIs like this. So we're going to have an LI here, and we're going to add a key to this because React, you want those keys. And we're going to say note.id, so that'll be unique. You want to add your unique keys. And then inside of this, we're going to have a div here. And then we'll also actually add some markup here. All right, and then we're going to have another div, some markup here. And then one more div. And then we'll do an H3. And then inside of here, we'll just say note.title. So we'll get the title here. Make sure we close that off. And then we can copy this down. We'll actually go p tag here maybe. Go p tag and we'll say note.content. And we'll change the styling up just a little bit so the text is small. All right, so this should be able to get all of our notes and show them in a list of LIs right here. Let's check it out. All right, so we got our one note there and it is showing below, which is exactly how we expected it. So that is looking good. Now, if we go to create another note here and update it, we see it clears out, but it doesn't actually show up right away. But then if we go ahead and refresh right there, it does. So what we're going to want to do is actually refresh this page. Now, there's a little bit of a trick to this. Because this is all happening on the server, it's not going to refresh right away like we'd like it to. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to create a little function, and it's going to call refresh data. So we're going to come up here. And we're basically going to fake a call to the client. So what we're going to say is const, and we'll say refresh data like this. And that's going to be equal to an arrow function like that. And then we're going to import our router in a second. So we'll say router is that there dot replace. And then we'll call router dot push. And I'll leave a link in the description, but I saw a blog post on this and how to do this. So I'll leave a link to that guy. So basically what's happening here is we're going to make a call to the client to fetch the current path, which will create a re-render for us when we submit a new note. So that is what's going to happen. This is going to be the current path here. Okay, so what we got to do in order to do that is bring in right here so we're going to import use router from next-router right there, and then what we're going to want to do is come in below our use state right here, and we're just going to say const, and we'll say router is equal to use router, and that's how we're going to call this. Okay. Oh, and that's not router.push. Of course, this is as path. So we want to call the current path. So that's why we're saying router.asPath. So now we're not actually using this refresh data. So we got to actually add that. So what we want to do with that is add that basically every time we make a call to add a note. So let's come back and find our create function here. So we call post right here, and then we're using this then method, tacking it on there. So what we're going to want to do instead of this is we're going to do braces here and make sure we close this off here. And then inside here, after this set form, actually, we can say refresh data like this and just call that. Okay, so now this should refresh our data. Let's try it out. Let's refresh this just to make sure. One more. And then we go ahead and we add this, and now it refreshes and we get this right away. So that is looking good. So we have our create function, we have our read function. We don't want our delete and our update. So let's go ahead and do a delete. So in order to delete, we're going to need a particular ID of a specific node. Now, in order to do that, we're going to come over here. We're going to come into our API. And what we're going to do is create a new folder, and it's going to be called node. And this is going to allow us a specific ID. And then inside here, we're going to come in and we'll say bracket ID like this. Bracket, and then we'll say .ts, and this is kind of specific to Next here. Now we can do very similar stuff to our create here, so let's actually copy out all of this and we can paste this in here, and a lot of this different stuff can be the same, but there's going to be a few differences. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to say get rid of this here, and we're going to come in and we're going to say const, and we're going to get the node ID like this. And we're going to get that from the request.query.id. So that's going to be the query of what we're passing in. And you'll see how that's going to work in a second. So we can come down here. And what we're going to say is if the request.method is equal to delete, like that, then we're going to come in and we're going to say const note like this, and that's equal to await, and we'll say prisma.note.delete. And then again, we can pass in those brackets, and then we want to say where. So this is going to determine the note we actually wanted to delete. And we'll say ID, and we'll pass in number and convert to a number. And then we'll say note ID like this. Then finally, below this, we're going to say res.json like that, and we'll pass in the note. Okay, so that looks good, and then we'll do an else clause here. And again, we'll just console.log. We'll say what note could not be created. Okay, and we can actually get rid of all this below here. Looks like we're missing a brace. All right, so looks like we have to bring one more // there, because that's coming from this outside of the note folder that we were just in as well. All right, so that looks good. That should be everything for our API with deleting this note. And again, you can do the same thing if you're going to do an update or something. This is getting a bit long, so we'll see if we actually get to that. We might just fake it and do it a little bit easier. All right, so let's come back to our index and add this delete functionality within our actual app here. So we have our create here. Let's come below this, and we will do our delete note. So same kind of thing, delete note like that. We're going to pass in an ID of type string. All right, and then again, same old, getting super repetitive, which I think is good. And inside this, we're gonna again hit that fetch, and then we're gonna do so we're gonna do a fetch here again, and we will do backticks and hit the URL. /API/note, and then here we're going to pass in the actual note. So we're going to say $sign here, and we'll say ID, and that's coming obviously from right up here. All right, and then we'll have a little second value here, and we'll add the headers, and same thing. And then this time we're going to have a method of delete. And then again, after this, we're going to want to refresh the data. So we can call that same function. We don't have to rewrite anything again. And we'll just go ahead and call that. And then finally, inside of this catch right here, again, we'll just console log the error, which is not a good way to handle errors, but it's how we're doing it. All right, so now what we want to do is add an actual button to delete the note. So let's come down inside of this second div. And what we'll do right here is just add this button. And we'll just add a nice X on here. And then what we'll do is add an onClick. And then call that delete note like that. and pass in inside of this that note.id. All right, so that is good. Let's add a little text Tailwind stuff, little class name action. All right, so hopefully that will make a call to our back end. Now let's go ahead and check it out. All right, so now we got all our notes here. We can click on this, hopefully. Oh, nothing happens. Let's see where error is here. So we got a 404 not found. So let's check out where that's coming from. Looks like we forgot a slash right here. So make sure you have that. Now let's come back and try it again. Refresh this. And hopefully we click on this and it disappears, and we click on this and it disappears. So we refresh that, that should be persisted, and it is. So that is looking really good. All right, so we're almost done there. We do want to have the ability to update something. Normally you do a put request and it would be the same thing basically, just with a put, but that's gonna add a little bit of time. So we're just gonna kind of fake it right here. So instead of actually doing all that put, we're just going to add another button here. So let's copy this down. And in here, we're just going to set the form instead of doing all that. So we're going to reset the form with the state of the note that we clicked on. And then we're going to delete the old note. So the IDs and stuff will actually be different, but that's going to be the only difference between doing this and actually making a put request. So instead of this delete note, we're just going to go set form. And here we're going to pass in the title, and that'll be note.title. We will say content, note.content, and then ID, and that'll be note.id, like that. And then we're going to come over, we'll say BG blue. We'll just change that to that. Everything else I think can stay mostly the same, other than this will say update. So in order to fake this, we need to determine if we're actually gonna create a new note or update the old one. So what we're gonna do is come into here. So when we're in our then block here, and we can actually go like this and say, if there's data.id, if that's a field that's there, we're going to come in and delete the note. So we'll say delete note like this, and we'll pass in data.id like that. And then finally we can set the form like this and refresh the data like that. Otherwise, else, we're just going to set the form and refresh the data. So we need 2 copies of that. There we go. All right, so I don't know if you understand what's happening here, but basically, if there's an ID, which is only happening in an update, so create, it won't have an ID. So if there is going to be an ID, then we're going to actually delete the note of the ID that we're passing in here, and everything else will be the same. So that'll be kind of the difference with update. So hopefully that works. Normally you'd come into here, and you do a put request, and you can say prisma.note.update and pass in the ID and stuff, but I just didn't want to create another one of these right now because this is dragging on a little bit. So let's go ahead. All right, so now we have our update. So we press this and it's going to set the form to this current note. So it'll set the note like this, and then if we want to update, we'll just say updated note like this, and if we said add there, it updates the note. Oh, but that wasn't deleted then, which isn't good. So let's try this again. Updated note, one more, press add. Oh yeah, sorry, that was actually fine. Okay, so that works good. We can get rid of this. We can do a new one, new note, test, add this note here. That looks great. We can update it. It fills in these columns again, update, and we press add again. That's going to update the note and delete the old note. So that is looking good. So those are the basic CRUD functions that you will need for basically any app you want to create on the internet. hopefully that was pretty useful. Next is pretty neat. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it, so I would suggest diving in and checking it out. If you want to see more Next stuff, Prisma stuff, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.